Hello my dear students, welcome to the third video of EVS class. The chapter's name is Living and Non-Living Things. Before starting on our chapter, let's recall what all things we have learned in the second video. We learned about the things around us and we categorized them in different names such as living things, non-living things, natural things and man-made things. Then we learnt about what each thing mean by. Let's take first about the living things. Living things are those things which can breathe, move, feel, right? Then they can respond to a stimuli, they can reproduce, eventually they will die. If all these factors are there for the living thing, for this thing, we call that as a living thing. Okay, for example, we can say, what's an example for a living thing? Just try one example for a living thing. Human beings. Animals. Plants. Right? So these are the examples of a living thing. Now moving on to the non-living thing. Non-living things don't have life. They don't have any of the qualities of a living thing. For example, bat, ball, and so many other things you may be knowing it. Now let's move on to the next one, natural things. The things that are created in nature. For example, sun, moon, mountains, valleys, rivers, all these are created in nature. Now the last one we learned about the man-made things. Man-made things are those things which are made by man, like table, chair, building, pen, pencil, all these are the examples of a man-made thing. Then in the next we learned how can we identify a thing whether it's a living or a non-living. We went through the features of a living thing. These are the features we learned in the last class. Right? We learned about the features of the living thing. The first one we learned that living things can breathe, living things can move, living things need food and water, living things feel, living things respond to stimuli and living things reproduce. And we learned the first two features of a living thing, that is they can breathe and move. Yes, let's look on to the how the living things can breathe. I said it earlier in the last video, all the living things breathe through different organs and we cite certain examples also. For example, we said about leaves. The leaves have tiny pores through which only the leaves can breathe or take in carbon dioxide and that tiny hole is called as the stomata. In the case of insect, it has a different organ for breathing and that is called as spiracle, that also are found on their body as a small holes. Then we talked about the earthworm. The earthworm breathe through their skin. Okay, and lastly we said about the human beings. Human beings have lungs to breathe. So this was the point that we learned in the last class. Then we learned that living things can move. All the living things have different kinds of movement. Our human beings can jump, we can skip, we can walk, we can sit. We have different kinds of movement. Just the same way animals also have different kinds of movement. But in case of non-living thing, both these properties are not applicable for them. They cannot breathe or they cannot move. That is why they are called as a non-living thing. Now let's move on to today's topic. That is, living things need food and water to grow. We all have food, right? Why do we eat food? Your answer most probably will be, it will give energy. Why do you need energy? To grow, right? All the living things need food to grow. Whether it's an animal or whether it's a plant or whether it's a human being. All of us need food to grow. So let's see how the plants make food, how the animals have food and how the human beings have food. Okay. So let's take the first one, that is the plants. In case of plants, plants prepare their own food. Okay, plants prepare their own food. They make their own food. We cannot go and feed the plants. Okay, so plants prepare their own food. How do they prepare their own food? They prepare their own food with the help of water, air, sunlight. With the help of these things, the plants can make their own food. I'll tell you once more, plants make the food of their own with the help of water, air and sunlight. The process of making the food of their own is called as photosynthesis. This word will be difficult for you, but if you put in practice, you can learn it very easily. Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Cut the word and learn. Okay. Photosynthesis. This process, what is meant is, the plants can prepare the food of their own with the help of water, air, sunlight. You know what's the sunlight, right? Now come, let's move on to air. Air means which kind of air do they need to breathe? They need carbon dioxide, and that we are exhaling it out, right? So carbon dioxide is the air that is needed by the plants. Then they need water. From where do they get water? They get water from the roots. With all these things together, they make the food of their own, and that process is called as photosynthesis. Now let's move on to the animals. Animals also make the food of their own. How do the animals make the food of their own? They depend on other animals or plants. They depend on other animals and plants, and they have their food. They cannot make the food of their own. They have to hunt for their living. Okay, now let's move on to human beings. Human beings also need, we already know how do we have the food. We cook and have the food. We eat the fruits raw. So we need food already, right? We need food a lot. So we human beings also need food a lot to grow. Why we are learning all these things? We are learning all these things shows that the water and the food that a human being or a living thing should have to grow. Otherwise, they are not able to have a proper growth. If they don't have energy, if they don't have a proper food, they don't get a proper growth. So human beings also need food and water to grow. Okay, so these are the things what is needed by each living thing to grow. Plants need water, air and sunlight to make their own food. And one more thing I just want to add on to that. Plants make the food through their leaves. Okay, and leaves, as we said earlier in the last class, the leaves have a tiny pores called as stomata. Remember, through that stomata, the tiny pores in that, they will absorb all the water, air and sunlight, and they make the food of their own for the plants. Okay, and one more thing is there, it's called as chlorophyll. This is a pigment which add color to the leaves. What is the color of the leaf? Green, right? So it add on the color to the leaves. With the help of these things, what happen? Plants prepare their own food, and that process is called as photosynthesis. Okay, let's move on to animals. Animals also have their food, which they depend completely on other animals or on plants. They cannot make the food of their own. They have to hunt for their living. And lastly, we have the human beings. Human beings also have food, either they may cook the food and have, or they eat it raw. Somehow they have the food and it helps us to grow. So now let's see what are the stages of growth we have. As I said, human beings also grow, but we grow in a different level. We born as a baby, then becomes a toddler, then becomes a child, and then finally an adult. So you can see in the picture the stages of growth of a human being. Next we can see the stages of growth of a plant. Firstly, it becomes a seed. From the seedling sprouts out, then becomes a sapling, and finally a tree or a plant. Then we can see about the chicks. Right here you can see first the egg hatches and comes out the chick, and finally a hen. So now you would have understood the different stages of growth of an animal, of a bird, and of a human being, as well as of the plants. Now let's check the worksheet connected with the topic what I have just taught you. Living things need food and water to grow. I'll read out the worksheet for you. Keep your hands on the worksheet and try to read after me. Okay. All living things need food and water to live. It provides energy to work. Animals eat plants and other animals. Green plants make their own food with the help of sunlight, air, water, and chlorophyll. Okay, so you can underline that sentence. Green plants make their own food with the help of sunlight, air, water, and chlorophyll. A baby grows into a child and then to an adult. In the same way, the seed of a plant changes into a seedling which grows into a big tree. The second point you can see, non-living things do not need food and water. Non-living things as they are made, they will exist like that itself till they are destroyed. So non-living things don't have life, they don't need food and water to grow. Now let's look to the activity here. You can see in the first box, you can see two pictures given there. You have to write what is the first stage of a thing and what is the last stage. When they grow up, what do we call that? So first box we will see what is the young one of a duck called. It's called as a duckling. And in the second line, when they grow up, we call that as duck. Okay, now let's move on to the next one. Next picture, you have what is the young one of a cat called? Kitten. Right? What is, when they grow up, they are called as cat. Right? Now let's move on to the next one. It's a seed. Seed sprouts and becomes seedling, and finally to a tree. Next one is small one of a adult is called as a baby, and when they grow up we call it as adult. So this is the worksheet for the topic we have taken just a few minutes back. Okay. Now the next feature we are going to learn about the living thing is that living things can feel. All the living things has a feeling sensation. They all can feel in different way. So our body has certain organs which will help you to feel certain things. So we can say that there are sense organs for us. What do we have? We have sense organs for us. There are 5 sense organs for us. Let's see. The first one is we have eyes, we have nose, we have ears, we have tongue, and finally we have skin. All these organs will help you to feel certain things. We can see what are the function of each organ. How do we sense? Okay, first let's see eyes. With eyes you can see the things. With nose you can smell the things. With ears you can hear the things. With the tongue you can taste the things. With the skin you can feel the things. So these are the 5 sense organs we have. So all the living things will be having these organs, so they can feel it what they are doing. Okay, so first one is eyes, nose, ears, tongue and skin. So these are the 5 sense organs we have. With these 5 sense organs we can feel the things. Now let's move on to the worksheet connected with that. I'll read out the worksheet. Living things can feel. Most animals, including man, feel with the help of sense organs such as eyes, nose, ears, tongue and skin. So how many sense organs do we have? 5 sense organs. But non-living things do not have any of these sense organs. That is why we call them as a non-living thing. So let's match the following. It will be easier and you would have done it in your lower classes as well. With your hands what do? You touch. So just to draw a line to it. With your nose what do? You smell. With your ears you hear. With your eyes you can see. With your tongue you can taste. Any method you can follow, you can either put 1, 2, 3 accordingly or you can draw the lines and do the matching. So with this we end up this video. I hope you have understood both the features of a living thing. Go through your worksheet clearly, underline the words which is difficult for you, write and learn clearly. Only with the repetitive work you will be able to learn. If a word is too big for you, too long for you, cut the words and learn, so it will be easier for you. Just like photosynthesis. So you can cut the word and learn and it will be easier for you. So just go through the video, go through your worksheet and learn properly. Thank you my dear children.